Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. How are you tonight? Everybody good? Yeah. So, as before, let's start with a word of prayer. O Lord our God, King of the universe, we invite you now to this place and to this time once again. We've set it aside to think and to grow in our understanding of who you are. So, as we watch and think and talk tonight, will you grant us discernment to see all that you would have us learn? Come and dwell among us as we come and see. Send your Spirit to enlighten us, that we may be indeed transformed by the renewing of our minds. We ask it in your great name, O Lord. Amen. Well, we come tonight to episode 5 of season 2, which is entitled simply Spirit. Now, this is actually going to pick up on the narrative that we saw last week with the healing of a crippled man by the pool up at Bethesda, up around the sheep gate on the northern side of the city in Jerusalem. The creators of The Chosen have given him a name, Jesse, an interesting choice, given that that was the name of a rather famous ancestor of Jesus. Who would that have been? Yeah, David's father, Jesse, the grandson of Ruth and Boaz, and the father of King David. You may remember that actually Isaiah in the 11th chapter begins with the words, "A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch, Netzer, will bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him." Then in verse 10 of that same chapter, the prophet says that in that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for all peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place shall be glorious. It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's what we're seeing with this root of Jesse, this one who is descended from Jesse, Jesus. In the Middle Ages, people began depicting all of the ancestors of Jesus in the image of a tree with all these branches on it. It was called a Jesse tree, and because at the root of it was Jesse. Out of you will come this branch. There's a Christmas carol that kind of picks up on that. Does anybody know what it is? It's kind of one of the ones that we don't sing quite as much. It's "Lo, how a rose ere blooming. Isaiah 'twas foretold it, the rose I have in mind." This is Jesse's root. So Jesse is a favored name for Hebrews then. But the chosen writers have gone even further and speculated, as we saw, that this Jesse might have been the brother of Simon, who is the zealot, who becomes a disciple. We met both of them last time. We saw that the healing of Jesse by the pool of Bethesda turns out to be a healing for his brother as well, who stops shy of killing a Roman officer when he sees his brother walking after being crippled for 38 years. But as he said to him, "When I see you walking in Jerusalem, I will know the Messiah has come." So the episode tonight picks up with the healed man, Jesse, being questioned by two of the Pharisees. Now, none of the Pharisees are named in the Bible. I think that is for their own protection. They're in the witness protection program of the scriptures. But they have given them two names, Shmuel and Yani. Shmuel, by the way, it sounds like a funny name, doesn't it? It's just the Hebrew form of an English name, Samuel. Okay, it means name of God, or it means God is heard. This is anything about Hebrew. It can mean this or it can mean this. It kind of depends on which vowel points that you put with it. Shmuel is also, in case you're wondering, why does that name sound so familiar? If you ever saw the old movie, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, about a little boy in a concentration camp, his name was also Shmuel. But neither Shmuel or Yani seem very gracious. Yani is a Greek name. It means God is gracious. But he's not, is he? So who are these guys? They are presented as Pharisees who actually, I'm going to say, get a bit of a bad rap in the Bible that is not wholly deserved. Many Pharisees, maybe most Pharisees, were well-intentioned. They believed that God's word, especially the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the books of law, the books which they say Moses wrote, was sacred, and they were doing their best to keep every jot and tittle of it. Okay. Now, unfortunately, that just made them a little hypercritical of everybody else. To be sure, the Pharisees were closer to the truth of who God is than their rival party in the Sanhedrin, which was the sort of governing group. That was who? Who's the rival of the Pharisees? You remember? The Sadducees. The Sadducees were not even looking for a Messiah. They had no interest in a Messiah coming, rescuing Israel. They were okay working with the Romans if they had to. They were more anxious to rescue themselves and to find satisfaction in this life because they didn't really believe in the life to come. They didn't believe in the resurrection. As I've often said, that is why they were sad, you see. The Pharisees at least had that going for them, okay? There's also going to be a reference to 2 principal schools of thought concerning the Mishnah. The Mishnah, as opposed to the Torah, which is those first 5 books, the Mishnah was the collection of Jewish oral traditions. And bear in mind that this is largely pre-literate society in which most people don't read and write. Some people can, and Hebrews were better than others were for that. But still, oral traditions were significantly a part of their understanding. So the Mishnah wasn't actually written down until the 2nd century A.D. And later in the 5th century, the Mishnah becomes the basis for something else you've perhaps heard of, the Talmud. The Talmud is the Mishnah, and the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah. And there will even be commentary on the commentary, okay? This is how this starts, okay? Because when you want to nail it all down, you are very precise about it. But the term itself, Mishnah, comes from a verb shana, meaning to study or review. And so this Mishnah was arranged by subject matter, divided into 6 orders. But by its very nature, the Mishnah was open to a lot of interpretation. Because when you're going on oral tradition, you're subject to somebody remembering it, aren't you? And people may remember things slightly differently, or they may remember something and interpret it differently. So by the time of Jesus, really, there were 2 different schools of thought that had emerged. 2 different sages, or who had sort of proposed things. Hillel, who's a rabbi, Hillel. If you went to college somewhere where there were Jewish students, you may have, in your wanderings across campus, seen the Hillel, which is named for him. That was the Jewish Students Association, their equivalent of the Baptist Student Association, although the Hillel had more fun than the BSA did. Shammai is the other rabbi that had his own sense of interpretations. Hillel, born in Babylon, from all the exiles who had been there and never had come back, many of them, but had immigrated to Israel. He became known for his piety and his kindness. Shammai was a native of Israel, born there. Both of them lived during the reign of King Herod the Great, which is the Herod of the birth narratives. Okay, Herod he's a maniacal genius, but maniacal is the operative word. 37 to 4 BC. Hillel was chosen by the Sanhedrin to act as its president, and there'll be a reference to that in the episode. Now, Shammai and Hillel actually only disagreed in 3 cases. But their followers in the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel in later years wound up disagreeing over about 300 cases. In most cases, the Shammai folks were far stricter in interpreting the law. Hillel took a more lenient approach. For example, in the case of the remarriage of an aguna, or of a woman whose husband was not known with certainty to be alive or dead. Okay. Hillel's school said that she could remarry even on the basis of indirect evidence of her husband's death. Shammai said, no, you got to have witnesses come forth with direct testimony before she can do that. Hillel favored admitting converts into Judaism if they came sincerely, even if they made unreasonable demands, such as one did of wanting to be taught the Torah quickly while standing on one foot. That's going to be a task, isn't it? Shammai said such a person wasn't serious about Judaism at all, and that they just tossed him away. Now, this suggests why Jesus is so critical of the Pharisees and members of the Sanhedrin, which tended to follow Shammai more than the more lenient rabbi. Because in Jesus' mind, such individuals tended to substitute their own interpretations, their own understandings of their own oral traditions, their own man-made rules over the actual meaning of the law. We see this really clearly Matthew 15. Some Pharisees come to Jesus one day and they ask him, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? That's the way to start a conversation, isn't it? They don't wash their hands before they eat. Growing up, I thought my mother was a Pharisee sometimes, but that's a different story. Jesus replied to them, and why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? Going on to say, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are mere human rules. Now, when Jesus said that, even the disciples were just a bit taken back by it. I love verse 12 of Matthew 15. It says, when they heard this, they came to him and asked, do you know the Pharisees were offended when they heard this, Jesus? I have a feeling Jesus says, well, duh. That was the point. Jesus issues this warning against hypocrisy once more. Matthew 23, he says, woe to you teachers of the law and you Pharisees, you hypocrites, you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Whoa. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, that is Jesus will say in Mark 7:8 to the Pharisees, you have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And again, in Luke, Jesus will say to the Pharisees, you are like unmarked graves which people walk all over and don't even know it. To which one of the experts in the law protests, teacher, when you say these things, you insult us too. Yeah. Jesus will also call them whitewashed sepulchres. Ooh. Because you know what a sepulcher is, right? It's a tomb. It's a tomb. And you can see them still if you go in Israel. And they frequently coat the outside of them, whitewash them so they look nice and clean and beautiful on the outside. What's on the inside? Rotting, decay, bones, putrid things, really. And so what is Jesus saying? You look good on the outside, but on the inside, there's something seriously wrong with you. In fact, you are dead on the inside. And then he will even say, And you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. This is serious, isn't it? I mean, this is not just trash talking on the part of Jesus. This is a critique that goes right to the root of the whole Pharisaic Shammai understanding that the oral tradition governs everything. Now, they're going to see this in the opening scene of this episode. Shmuel and Yani are still trying to figure out Jesse's healing. But then, as the writers of our study have pointed out, it doesn't take a black robe to be a Shmuel. When we judge others, when we hold on to grievances, when we even question what God is doing in someone's life because it doesn't fit our theological presuppositions, we fall into that same trap, don't we? We become a Shmuel, which, is now your new thing to say to your spouse if you need to. Don't be such a Shmuel. Okay. And if they don't know what that is, you say, well, you would if you weren't a Shmuel. Now, we also see Jesse's brother, according to this series at least, Simon the Zealot, as he begins his new life, following not the order of the revolutionaries he had been a part of, but following the one whom he has been enabled to see is the actual Messiah. Following Simon will be another fictional character whom the writers have imagined, a Roman super soldier, a secret agent, whom they will call Atticus Petronius. That's a name that they've made up, but it's a name that would suggest a Greek background. Atticus refers to Athens, and Petronius is Etruscan, which speaks to the pre-Latin civilization in Tuscany, which was largely influenced by the Greeks. Now, we don't know where Atticus Petronius is going to fit into the long term of this story, but I have a feeling we haven't seen I've seen the last of him. We'll also see a conversation between Jesus and his older cousin by 6 months, John the Baptist, or the baptizer. We're not entirely sure they are actual cousins per se, for the simple reason that the word in Greek can be used to describe other family relationships as well, including nephews, uncles, grandchildren. We can't say with certainty Mary and Elizabeth are first cousins. We can say with certainty they are kinswomen. They're family in some way, which makes Jesus and John family in some way. We'll come back to their conversation after the video, but I want to say a quick word about the affair that was to eventually cost John the Baptizer his life. It had to do with the Herod family. And the fact that Herod the Great, and Herod, we should know, is an honorific title like king or pharaoh, okay? It's not your first name. Herod the Great had at least 14 children by at least 8 different wives. One of those sons was named Antipas, and when his father died around 4 BC, after the birth of Jesus, Antipas was given the region of the Galilee that he could be in charge of. In 26 AD, Antipas went to Rome to visit his half-brother Philip, same father, different mothers, and to visit Philip's wife Herodias and their child Salome. Now, Antipas had been to Rome before because, in fact, all of Herod the Great's sons were educated in Rome, in Caesar's palace. And his older half-brother Philip remained in Rome after his education. He was trying to get perhaps as far away as possible from all the family drama back in Israel. Herodias, too, though, was related to the whole family because she was the daughter of another son of Herod the Great, Aristobulus. It was not easy being a son of Herod. he killed many of them, including her father, Aristobulus. There was a saying that it was better to be a pig in Herod's household than a son. Um, Herod then parceled out his grandchildren to other family members. He ordered Herodias, his grandchild, to marry Philip. She was 8 at the time. He was perhaps 20 when they were engaged. They probably got married when she was 15. So when Antipas got to Rome, Philip would have been in his early 50s. Antipas probably was 46. And Herodias was in her early 40s. So to sort it out, and it is sorted indeed, Philip was his wife's uncle, as was his half-brother Antipas, who was also her brother-in-law. Antipas and Philip's wife fell in love. The plan was for Antipas to divorce his wife, Phasaelis, and for Herodias to divorce her husband, Philip. Now, we don't know how Philip took all this. He might have been fine with it, but there's no record of it. But they did that. They moved back to Israel with her teenage daughter, Salome, settling into Antipas's palace in Tiberias, which is on the Sea of Galilee, on the southern shore. Now, all of this scandalized and stunned good Jews. This is just way too much Dallas Dynasty Falcon Crest all rolled together. This is just. And Leviticus 20:21 had said, if a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. Such were the lifestyles of the rich and Roman. Okay, this is what is going to so enervate John the Baptizer, that he's going to feel compelled that he has to speak against it, because everybody in the country, in Galilee at least, is upset about it and is riled up about it. And everybody knows this is just wrong somehow. And then finally, there will be the appearance of a demon-possessed man. He appears to be a kind of a composite figure of sorts between numerous individuals who was met by Jesus. This is a man in constant torment, crying out, cutting himself with stones just to feel something else. I don't know how you feel about demons, but I'll tell you that we see instances of demonic possession throughout the Gospels. Places like Matthew 9, Matthew 12, Matthew 17. In every instance, someone so afflicted is brought to Jesus, including a man who brings his son to Jesus who's having seizures. Mark 5 tells us about a demon-possessed man on the east side of the Sea of Galilee who is living among the tombs around Gergesene, Gadarene. It's interchangeable names for this area. There's a woman up in Tyre in Syrophoenicia, what would be now up in Lebanon, whose daughter is also afflicted by this in Mark 7. There's a man in a synagogue in Capernaum, Jesus' new hometown, which has an unclean spirit, Luke 4. And Luke 22:3 will even suggest that Jesus was betrayed after Satan entered Judas. Now, in some of these instances, the demon possession will cause physical ailments, inability to speak, epileptic seizures, blindness, etc. In other cases, the most obvious being actually Judas, it causes a person to do evil. In the case of the Gadarene, whom Jesus will meet on the other side of the lake, he was possessed by what appeared to be superhuman strength. And when he is asked his name, he will say, "We are legion," suggesting not just multiple personalities, but that he had multiple demons. A Roman legion was, by the way, 6,000 men. Now, we ought to acknowledge that almost all of these characteristics can be explained in other ways. So it's not important to say, it's important to in fact not say that every every depressed person or epileptic is somehow possessed. They're not. But on the other hand, it's pretty clear Western cultures don't take satanic manifestations in people's lives as seriously as we should. Because as we see in the example of Peter, Matthew 16, even a believer can be influenced by the devil. And when a person opens up their heart for evil, as Judas appeared to do, occasioned by his greed or his profound disappointment with Jesus, it becomes an opening for the adversary and his evil hosts to enter right in, especially if it's coupled with idol worship or with occult fascinations. I don't know how many of you grew up playing with a Ouija board. I don't know if I had a Ouija board, but I certainly used a Ouija board when I was growing up. Did anybody else do that? Okay, so full of demon-possessed people. Okay, good. I don't know if there's anything demonic about a Ouija board. But what I do know is that if you seek wisdom from anyone but God, you're going to be, first of all, disappointed, and second of all, you may or may not get good information. And third, it's going to begin putting you in a frame of mind which doesn't look towards God, but which looks towards inanimate objects, like a Ouija board. Now, I gotta tell you, I always felt like somebody was actually moving it, it wasn't just moving across by itself somehow. But I do believe occult fascinations open up doors in people's lives for something that is more serious. And the bottom line, however, is that Jesus is stronger than anything the devil can throw up against him. And if we're living in Christ, we share that strength with him. I do not believe that someone who professes Jesus as Lord can be possessed. I just don't. But I do believe that they can be influenced and they can be used, and crazy things can happen, particularly when mob mentality sets in. So as we meet this demon-possessed man tonight, listen for the question that Mary Magdalene, who has perhaps had her own experience with this, will ask him. She's going to want to know what his name is, what his real name is. Because remember, she has been through a period in her life when she wasn't Mary, when she was Lilith, when she was somebody that you wouldn't even recognize now. So with that in mind, let's turn to our episode for the evening and watch. It's about 45 minutes tonight.